Well, yes, I want to reiterate the thanks that Anne has made to all of you for engaging with us today and for the real workers who actually put this together and got us all to the right place at the right time. And I was going to say told us what we thought, but actually we are capable of a wee bit of individual thinking as well. But it's been a very positive time both last evening and today. I think it was useful last night to do the reflection bit and to take a look back and a stock take. But today for me has been really beneficial. We started off with the accountability discussion and that was okay. I'm not minimising the value of it or anything like that, but in one sense on reflection it was a wee bit of preaching to the converted on that. There's not too many people in this room not advocating for firm accountability mechanisms for policing and indeed for broader public service. But for me, it was good to, I guess, publicly declare the value, even sometimes the discomfort of that proper accountability, and actually to be reminded of the legitimacy that proper accountability brings to policing. And actually, it is it's the linchpin of policing by consent or policing with consent. But I thought the discussion before lunch around collaboration and Will's input and indeed the entire panel was really powerful. My only frustration is that we didn't have like about 2 weeks of it because we just didn't have enough time. But I thought it was really, really powerful and it was hugely encouraging. I remember being appointed as chief in June 2014. Within 3 weeks, the lovely executive at the time gave me an in-year budget cut of something of tens of millions. Thank you, Anthony. Literally, I think it was about mid-July. They let me get the 12th of July out of the way and then told me all this money was coming out of the budget. And of course, all the departments and arm's length bodies and agencies were treated the same way. It was just the reality of austerity. But the Justice Committee at the time called me in front of them in September to talk about the implications of this. As often happens in this jurisdiction, it became localised issues about number of neighbourhood policing officers in Fermanagh and other things, all of which is important. But I remember speaking to my own staff, to Kiwi and to others when I came back from the Justice Committee, and I actually felt a little bit deflated because I was talking about some of the tangible implications that we could predict, but I'd also tried to talk to the Justice Committee about this thing called collaboration, and actually the funding trajectory is only going in one direction, and therefore we need to do things differently. And the way to do this is more intelligently, sharing information, moving on to a preventative agenda, earlier intervention, all of that based on information sharing and an outcomes-based approach. And I could see, and it was an after-lunch session in fairness, and I'm maybe a bit monotone and boring in my delivery, so I could see people physically glazing over. And I wasn't getting any questions about it, and there was no intrusion around it. And here we are, 2 years on with a new mandate, a new executive, a programme for government based on an outcomes-based approach, and actually the active discussion that we heard today around collaboration. I think that that is progress, and that gives me real feel for optimism as we look into the next few years. And I think you need, because I'm mindful, as always, of Coola's counsel. He said the police need to just cool their jets a wee bit or something like that and not run ahead on this. We now have collaboration, I think, a consensus around a proper collaborative approach is the way ahead. Well, I am very happy to be led on that. I'm happy to sit back for 5 minutes. But we need either through the policing board, my accountability body, or the department, or something. We need some way of gathering the energy that's been in this room today to really drive this collaboration agenda forward. You have a commitment from us in the police service to that, and we are happy to be part of that discussion, if not lead it. Will Lyndon made a very good point around collaborative working and partnership working and friendship working, whatever we ended up calling it. That you need 3 things: resilience, resilience, resilience. And I think that is really valid because there will be bumps on the road and we will have frustrations about the indicators that are going to show us that we're making progress against these outcomes. We can't afford to take a huff on any of that stuff, actually. We actually, We actually need mature, collaborative dialogue, patience, and all of that for me is resilience. It's sort of digging deep around that personal and organizational resilience. I think that's really important. Another piece that came out in that collaboration piece was the capacity that can be released through community to help us deliver our public services, policing, in our case, in my case. And I'd love to have got to tease that out a bit more, because community is not homogenous. There is a danger that when we go to communities, and we find this when we try to practice what we preach around policing with the community, we find that sometimes it's those with the most decibels, those who create the most noise, that get listened to and get the influence. The loudest people and the loudest perspectives are not necessarily the most valid. And that doesn't mean that we should be selective or prejudiced or stereotypical in who we engage with. But there is something about taking an evidence-based research approach to what's actually going to work to harness that capacity within communities, or even to harness within communities what is really wanted. And so, that takes us into this afternoon session, and the research that Peter delivered to us, really drilling into a segment of community in terms of women and young people and their perceptions and their feeling, to actually deliver to us an evidence base from community that actually helps us to deliver a better service. I thought that was really good piece as well around, speaking of community, the sort of public expectation piece that Rick presented, and the distance, the gap that it can create for policing to fall into between public expectation and the actual demand, the actual workload. And I do think that, he said very briefly in passing that requires good leadership and public education. And I would like, again, to extend that conversation with the board and with others into how do we actually do that public education. I have a fear, as I said in one of my earlier comments, that if we do it, it sounds a bit defensive, and the cops would say that. They're always moaning about not enough money and all the rest of it. But actually, there is a really serious piece about where the harm lies in terms of where the demand is, and what we as public servants should be doing to address that harm may not actually be what the public at first blush feel that they want, which is probably going to be high visibility policing in localities and funding going into local initiatives. Well, none of which I'm against, by the way. It's all good stuff, but it may not stack up with the evidence base. I really enjoyed the inputs from Rick and Peter. I was a bit worried about Peter Sherlow, actually. I hold him in the highest regard. I think he's got a brilliant, coherent brain. I wish I had half of his intellectual capacity, and I think he's a powerful communicator. But I did notice, and maybe this is the trick, maybe this is where all these strengths come from, all his sort of reference points about social research in Liverpool were based around pubs. Did you know that? The Carousel, the Belvedere, the Parisian and Mediterranean bars, and he even talked about afternoon drinking at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, but I thought that the really powerful thing in all of that was actually this piece, and it fits with what Rick was saying about public expectations against demand, and I'm almost finished, bear with me. I'm just enthusiastic about this, and I want to just capture the moments of I think, real insight that we've had today. This piece about putting the resource to where it needs to be in terms of supporting young people, supporting families or other significant others around young people, rather than to distribute the resources based on what Peter described very powerfully as the two-tribe thesis. We need to develop those interventions that we know that are actually going to work. And we have great research like what we've discussed this afternoon to take us there. And finally, and I think it's part of I suppose the exhortation for all of us moving forward. The term post-conflict society rolls off our tongues. I use it every day. Let's focus, as Peter urged us to, on the post rather than the conflict. Because actually, Dave Thompson and his PCC have gone on. But actually, the challenges that we face around austerity, budgets, community confidence, accountability, and all the rest of it aren't that different to Birmingham or Liverpool, actually. And we need to stop using the conflict label as an excuse for not doing things and actually just get on with it. So by all means, we give reference to post-conflict, but let's focus on the post-piece of that phrase rather than the conflict. I hope you can see from my delivery of this to you that I have enjoyed and am optimistic about the future. I think there's been a good quality of debate. It's been a successful conference. Thank you for attending, and thank you for the real organisers of this from the Policing Board and my own organisation that made it happen. Thank you very much.